Hi, everybody. We're going to do the webinar thing of waiting a couple minutes for everybody to get in. Glad you're all here. All right. Hello, everybody. We're going to get started. And I'm sure that there will be people coming in as I talk, and that is just fine. Thank you all very, very much for being here tonight. My name is Sarah Moon. I'm the Associate Director of College Counseling at St. Anne's. And we are very lucky to have this panel of folks with diverse perspectives on queer and trans college experiences. To get right into it, with us tonight, we have two St. Anne's alums. They were very happy to see again. Sydney Boyum, who is a senior at Vassar College, and Kaya Lee, who graduated Pomona in 2020. And joining us from on different campuses and with different roles, we have Chris Serjak, kinda, almost. Yeah, sure. Senior Associate Director of Admission at Whitman College, Tamara Seiler, Interim Co-Director of Admission at Rice University, and Gage Monroe, Community Engagement Coordinator at the University of Vermont's PRISM Center. I want to get started right away and leave plenty of time for Q&A at the end. So I'm going to start by picking on Sydney and Kaya and saying, can you guys talk about a little bit what you were both looking for, queer and otherwise, when you started your college search?
Okay, I'll go first. So hi everybody. I was thinking about this question when you reached out for us to do the panel, and I think it was something that I talked about with Lewis, my college counselor, like kind of early on when we were making a list, and it wasn't like super, it wasn't something I definitely thought about it and made it clear to him that it was important, but I think just when we were making the list and going through every place I was going to apply to, it just was like, what do you know about the reputation of this college with queer students? And, is this going to be a safe place? What do you hear about this? So I think it actually initially was pretty simple when I was trying to figure out like where I wanted to go and what I wanted to do. And I think he did a pretty good job of helping me figure out like what would be good fits and what wouldn't. And some of the schools on that list kind of surprised me or like challenged my expectations. Um, and I ended up being really happy with my decision, but that was kind of how that started, I think.
Yeah, I feel like I was very systematic when it came to looking for I'm a list girl. I will make a list, okay? And so I had things that I think correlated to like a queer friendly experience, but also to just like the type of place I wanted to see myself and I wanted to live in, right? So obviously growing up in New York, like I knew I was very comfortable with city life. And then I was like, okay, how far away do I want to deviate from that, right? So for those who aren't familiar with Pomona, it's more like suburban. It's certainly not in a city. They love to talk about how close we are to LA, and you got to do some work to get to LA, but like, it's there. Like the proximity is there. But right, that was actually something I wanted. I wanted the ability, right, the proximity to a city, but without being like, okay, I am trapped, right? So I knew that those are things that, like, just historically, statistically tend to sort of correlate with like bigger cities, tend to be more liberal, tend to, and then I think at some point in the like middle of my college search, I was like, okay, from these places that I have, like, let me do specific like queer facing research on like what are students saying and things like that. I know there are more questions about that later, but I think that's what I was thinking of, like not just like how the student body to me felt, but also like are these places where the colleges are located, are those the types of places that you see yourself living in, which I think was really important for me.
Absolutely. And so then for the folks who are working at colleges, one of the things that I'm wondering about for the people in the audience who might be starting a college search or about to head to a college themselves, thinking about how, as you're trying to get to know a college, how do you figure out if it's a queer affirming place or not? Like, do you literally go to campus and count rainbow flags? How do you figure out what that's going to look like before you live there?
I'll jump in and then hand it off real quickly. So, you know, there are a lot of great colleges in the United States and worldwide for that matter, and your first dive is probably going to be on the internet, right? So looking for easy resources, I think would be my first bit of advice. Is there an LGBTQIA center? What is the staffing of that like? Is there LGBTQIA housing available? What, you know, when you do a quick search, what pops up? Do you see that there are gender neutral bathrooms? Like, what's the preferred name policy? You can find these things with just a couple clicks. So that, I think that's a first good look right there. And happy to hear from my colleagues.
I would agree. I think a web search is probably going to get, and a web search not just for the college, but in general, perhaps to see what kind of news is out there about the school itself. You know, I know in our case, you know, we do a lot of celebratory type of things. We try to make sure that that message gets out to the community. You know, right now we're preparing for a queer panel of professional panel so that they can start talking about what it means to hosting for students, what it means to be queer in the professional world, and getting a variety of people to come and talk about what it means in different industries, what it means with certain identities. But I think, you know, maybe, you know, definitely digging in to see, you know, what that, the support, do they have queer support for, you know, for what happens beyond the college, you know, for finding a job, for supporting, like, do you have, is there, I think it's not just support, but how much it's celebrated. And I think that's what you want to be looking for, is not just that people are tolerating you, but that people are truly celebrating your identity.
I love all of what was just said and I'll add a little bit more in that what about those policies, if we're thinking about gender inclusive housing or we're thinking about restrooms on campus, what about those policies is catered to your needs as an individual, right? I might go in and be like, I'm cool with gender inclusive housing as long as it's just me and my gay roommate. Other people are like, I want to live on a floor full of queers and have a big gay time in college. And like that is something that's available. So I think looking at what are those specifics that you want and seeing if your campus or a potential campus has them available. I'm also just checking my notes to see if there's anything specific when you're looking at policies, right? Like those live name policies, how easy is it to access those? How many hoops do you have to jump through to get to that final result? Some people are willing to put in more work than others, and so it's just really a recognition of how much work do you want to put in. Sometimes you might be the person creating those spaces, and other times you might just be coming into them. And like whatever you want is good for you. It's just important to know upfront what feels good and accessible. But yeah.
Absolutely. And I'm wondering if you guys can talk a little bit about what it means at your particular institutions, and this is for all of you alumnus too, like to be queer affirming. What does that look like at your particular institution? Not trying to turn it into a college fair. I just want to know.
Well, I've been very active. In fact, I sit on the board of our Rice Alumni Pride, and I think you know, I think one of the things that's been good is to sort of push the conversation. I think, you know, we are an institution that people are like, well, yes, of course, students feel supported, and then you start asking very specific questions about, well, what about this? Well, what's the policy on the student changing their name? What's the policies on how we're sharing information with parents? How do we make sure our students stay safe if they've shared information with us that should not be shared with their family? And then you start saying, well, I don't know. And so I think it's a constant battle of making sure that, and also admitting that you're going to have segments of your institution that are not as supportive of these policies, and making sure that, but they will conform. It's like, and that they're not going to create spaces of trauma for students. So I think it is a conversation that is ongoing. I've been here for, at my institution now for 32 years, and I would say the conversation has really gotten intense in the last 20 years of really like trying to figure out how to change this institution so that for everyone. I mean, I think we've done a lot of good change, but this is certainly, and also put ourselves in a space of learning, because that's one of the reasons why I became a reader for the Point Foundation, was to really start challenging my own biases, because we all have them, and making sure that I was being as informed and could be a resource for not just students, but everyone who needed me to perhaps push them so that we're doing the right thing by our students. So I think it's a constant, never being satisfied with the status quo, and always being able, but willing to push that envelope on how we can be even better, because there's always an opportunity to be better.
Absolutely. Thank you. And I just got a question in the Q&A saying from some folks who came in late, if you can say what school you're talking about in your response, because they missed that in the intro. Who's next?
Happy to go next. So, hi friends who are just joining us. My name is Gage, she, they pronouns, and I'm talking about the University of Vermont. So I am incredibly lucky to work in a queer and trans resource center, the PRISM Center at UVM, with three other full-time staff members, 2 graduate students, and 9 student staff. So that's a staff of 15. And all of us are here to do queer liberation work, as we like to call it. We are here to uplift queer and trans joy always. And so that's like where the center of like queer affirming spaces comes from, out of like our space. This year that shifted to look a lot like uplifting queer community as it's being built outside of our spaces. We don't want to prescribe what community looks like, because honestly, like I'm 27 and I'm the youngest on the team. Like I've been out of college for a hot minute. I'm like, I don't know what y'all are doing. I want to uplift what you're doing. And so we are saying to our students, like, what is going on in your spaces? Let us use our resources to lift that up. And so that has looked like there's a successful Dungeons and Dragons campaign that happens like nearly every Saturday. And there's like 30 students in our lounges having a good time, right? So I'm looking at like, what does it look like at UVM? There's events, there are speakers, there are queer joy moments that we are uplifting and sharing consistently and as like frequently as we can. So that way our full-time staff can then do the policy work, and we can do okay, let's sit down with administrators and make it so you can log into the directory and change your live name and pronouns in a matter of seconds across every system at UVM, and nobody asks a question, and no one who needs to know a legal name knows it unless they need to for their job, right? And so we are reducing opportunity, or like reducing the chances of getting dead named or misgendered in classes. And that is something that is not often available at every institution I'm seeing, or like there are so many hoops to jump through, or you have to like go to court to prove that like you are this person. And so we're saying like, no, we don't want to do any of that. We want to just affirm your identity up front. And so I love to be in those spaces. So really it is like how much can we do to like uplift your joy and take off the burden of having to advocate for yourself and having to like fight through these systems that are like built against you. And then constantly doing that work to be like, okay, hey, queer people weren't in mind when you wrote this policy, so let's change it up. And that's what we're doing at UVM, and trying to do even more.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would echo a lot of what my colleagues are saying. Friends who joined a little bit late, my name is Chris Saravjak, use they pronouns, and I work for Whitman College. I'm a senior associate director there. I was just reading recently, so I'm thinking about like what colleges are doing to support their communities, and frankly, they're going to have to. Like, if they're not already supporting the queer community, full almost 30% of adult Gen Z students are identifying somewhere on the spectrum. I read that statistic today. I was just so stoked, right? And if I look at the fact that millennials is, I don't know, 20%, and Gen X, which I am, is 14%, like the growth has been just, phenomenal to see. I think it's always been there, but it's just sort of been, subculture. So it's coming to the forefront. So I think you should really kind of go into your college year expecting that these things are going to be available for you. That's the piece that I would add to that.
Thank you. And people who are perhaps slightly closer to their college experiences.
Yeah, okay, I'll go.
There we go.
Yeah, so for my friends joining us late, my name is Kaya, she, her. And I went to Pomona College, and then I actually worked in admissions for a year at Pomona, so helpful. I think it's a double-edged sort of value proposition, right? I think Gage really touched on an important point, which is understanding where where along the spectrum you are willing to be as a student, right? Are you willing to go to a place where this mentorship and community is sort of burgeoning and is really in its nascence? Or are you like, listen, I just want to plug and play, and I just want, a community that's already built in? Both are valid, both are, really strong positions to be in. I think just knowing for yourself where you fit makes that transition a little great.
Yes.
Amazing. Yes. I knew I said it so good. I knew it. Makes that transition a little less friction filled, right? Specifically for Pomona, right? A lot of it is built into the community aspect of it. So some of it is like, we had QAMP, which was like queer questioning mentorship program, which is you get partnered with older students who identify as queer in somewhere along the spectrum. You can get more specific or less specific as much as you want to be, or it can sort of be an anonymous sort of, just place to go for conversation. I know that we had an entire LGBTQIA plus resource center. They put on like movie nights. They had trans clothing drives, right? That was about like, okay, I don't know necessarily how to access clothing, or maybe I'm just socially transitioning and I'm just trying to figure out, what that's like, because going shopping can be scary or expensive. So then there were the resources like that. They have a whole month called Gapril, which is like gay pride, but we're not usually in school in June, so they call it Gapril, right? So it's nice to have the like student focused thing that feels sort of buzzy, but then there's always the question of, inviting people is one thing, having the resources to support them is another. So then getting a little deeper in the weeds of like, what is the pronoun policy? This even helps like when you email directors and people. Like when I worked at admissions, we had a big thing about, put your pronouns in your email bio, and that lets people know that that's a conversation that's happening around you, right? So yeah, just different specific things. These are all things that every lovely person on this panel has said already, but yeah, that's kind of how it works out at Pomona.
Thank you.
For anyone that just joined, I'm a senior at Vassar College, so I'm about to graduate. And yeah, you all said really wonderful things. I think my experience coming to Vassar and like making that transition and finding queer resources was a little bit different, because I came out in high school, transitioned in high school, and once I got to Vassar, I was like, I don't want anybody to be thinking about this. Like, I'm having so much fun, like I'm stealth, I'm not gonna, say this, that, or the other thing. And so the issues that I was thinking about when I first got to college were more about, are people respecting this on a base level? you know, who can I be comfortable coming out to? Are professors saying normal things in classes, you know? And I also came in during COVID, so the programming was really kind of like a different layout in fall 2020. But I think, yeah, so a lot of it was about what's going on in the classroom. Are people sort of respecting this in the classroom? And I have to say, every class that I've been in, professors do name pronouns, you know, is your name different than what's on the transcript? Like, they're not going to make a scene out of it. And if they do, there really is like a lot of administrative support that comes from that. So I would say that was like kind of one of the more important things for me. And then since then, kind of looking at like queer programming and stuff, I feel like there's not like a ton of queer programming at Vassar that's like easily accessible. It's sort of surprising. It's almost like there are events that are shifted towards queer students, but not explicitly mentioned. So like a lot of the DJ events have like a queer undertone. Um, a lot of the, you know, different like events that go on are catered towards queer students, but not explicitly stated, which is kind of interesting. So a lot of the onus is on, you know, what does the student body want? Do they want to advertise this as a queer event, or do they want to advertise this as this is our event, it's run by queer people, we're not going to put that right out there. So it's an interesting distinction, and I think just different people like different things.
Absolutely. So then one question that I was going to ask later, but instead I'm going to ask it now. On a campus like that, how do you find community once you're there? Like, if, especially when it's not necessarily, oh, I'm going to go hang out at the center, how do you do it? I'm going to toss it right back to you, Sydney.
Totally. I think it definitely takes time. And like I said, I came in fall 2020, so my experience meeting people was very COVID centric. It was a little bit like warped by sort of how many people we were allowed to see, sort of meeting people outside, social distancing. But I was really amazed at like how many students were queer and the way that it was almost like woven into some of the fabric of being with people, and not something that was, it's not that queer spaces aren't needed, but it was really like widely accepted as part of just the way that people live at Vassar. And so I almost didn't feel like I needed that extra outlet. And it definitely did take me more time to find um, queer people whose experiences I related to like more directly, just because of the size of the school and coming in during COVID. But I think just with the way that Vassar is, I found it pretty straightforward, which was really nice.
Thank you. I'm trying not to pepper you guys with questions or speed us up too fast. If anybody wants to add anything, please do before I move us on. Yes.
Something I would like to encourage people to do too is if you go to a campus and you're not finding these spaces, you aren't seeing them. I know it can be scary, but take that leap and build one yourself and say, find an advisor, find an ally somewhere. And I think we're going to talk about that maybe. But find someone to support you and then say, like, I'm building this space. Like, do you want to come? Like, maybe we're just going to watch movies on a Thursday night and somebody's going to, there's going to be pizza. Free food will bring people to an event, trust. But build those spaces. That's part of the beauty of being in the LGBTQIA+ community is we do community well. Show up and say, hey, I'm going to have this space. It's queer focused. We're doing this. I don't know. At UVM, people love to craft. They love to crochet. I don't know if that's a national trend, but the girls are knitting and crocheting. So like find a hobby, find a niche, and then make it gay. And people will show up.
I'm going to absolutely take that segue to exactly what you said, which is, so when students, especially for admissions folks, when students come and they say sort of, or how do I find this community? Right now I'm here. Are there organizations that you sort of turn to? Are there mentors on campus that you suggest folks look at? And this is obviously also for Sydney and Kaya, if there are spaces or people that you found particularly helpful. What are those at your particular institutions?
Well, I mean, I think our institution is defined by our residential college system. And so as part of orientation week, we try to make sure that we're creating spaces where we can have difficult conversations or challenging conversations. And so we have our diversity advisors, and as part of our diversity advisors who then go into the colleges and create dialogue spaces for new students, we want to make sure that we're kind of like, let's ripping the Band-Aid off. Let's talk about like, how do you get along with each other? How do you interact with each other? What's the purpose of, what does a good interaction look like? What does a challenging interaction look like? And then, and among our diversity advisors, we're going to have representation, of as many types of advisors as we can. We'll, intersectional diversity. So, like really like, a lot of times, sometimes even diversity within diversity. We've had to have some challenging conversations even within our LGBTQ plus community because, some people are like, oh, well, the gay men act this way, and then the trans and the gay women, the lesbians act this way. And I'm like, okay, we need to talk, like all together. And so, and make sure everyone feels supported because, and even age becomes a thing. Even our Pride organization, some of our older members have said, well, there's so many letters now. And I'm like, okay, whatever, dude. So I mean, and in fact, our students were like, we can simplify this for you. We don't even want to use all these letters sometimes. And there's some people who lean more into like wanting to say, gender and sexual minorities or like, but I think just making sure that everybody feels validated. And the other thing I wanted to contribute is that sometimes it's not just about the students, it's about the family that represents them. I think one of the most challenging conversations I had once was making sure that the student who was bringing in their transgender dad was feeling supported, because we need to be able to provide the same safe space for the parent if they're or and the family, not just the student, because that's part of their, making sure their family feels welcomed and safe on campus if they are of the community as well. So so I think this is it's always the opportunity to have more conversation on how we can be better.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I think Tamara really hit the nail on the head with kind of the breadth of different kinds of diversity. At Whitman, we sort of think about diversity under an umbrella of inclusive excellence. So not just being inclusive or tolerating, but actually being like quite good at it. So we work with a lot of we'll bring in an outside consultant and have intensive time with certain departments. The admission office did that recently. It was super helpful, and it was not tailored only to LGBTQIA plus or queer people, but a variety of identities. And I think sometimes for smaller colleges, like Whitman is 1,500 students, so significantly smaller than a Rice or a UVM, making sure that your particular identity, if you need support, is going to be there too. So sometimes looking at those subgroups. So we might have an overarching queer student group, but we also might have queer trans students of color or Jewish queer students, or specific identities. So yeah, I think like doing the deep dive and just seeing what's there for you.
All right, folks, I'm going to go to the next one, which is a kind of big topic, which is about healthcare. And I'm wondering about what students should look for from their campus when it comes to LGBTQIA plus healthcare, and including the fact that like this is a changing landscape and often a swiftly changing landscape. And how can even Tamara, I'm obviously headed towards you in a minute, right? Like even when a campus is located in a place where access might be difficult to get on campus, how can you do you have to rule that out, right? How does that support look like, even if the local laws are making things difficult? So that's sort of a two-part, like for everybody, what does it look like to have LGBTQIA plus affirming healthcare on campus? And also, what resources can students look for if it's not on campus?
Well, of course, being located in Texas, I feel like we're in a constant fight with our governor and his minions. You know, thankfully, Houston has maintained it. So I think, you know, even, but we certainly, you know, I had a sad and challenging conversation with an alumnus, and their child had ruled out Rice because of its location in Texas, and just, you know, with the feeling that we can control, you know, we can control what's happening on our campus. For the most part, Houston is a safe space, but even just thinking about the greater navigation of the state of Texas was concerning to them. And I think that they just, and as we started with, I mean, I think it's what you're willing to do and what you have the energy to do. And in this case, the student didn't want that fight to be part of their college experience. And I totally, totally accept that. It made me sad because I thought they could be really a great match, but totally get it. I mean, you have to know what you have the energy for. And I think that's true of anything. You know, we can't expect students of a certain identity to take on more and to take on more trauma. And I think people have to figure out, like, you know, what is it? And we do have some students who come here with the express purpose of changing things. That's like, and being willing to, you know, that they came here for a fight, and they're willing to put everything they have into it, and they know that they can find allies. And you know, we are, one thing I would say that we always talk about, we never could have picked the place that we put our campus, but we're so glad it's here. You know, being adjacent to the world's largest comprehensive medical center, and being adjacent to what is known as the sort of the LGBTQ plus center of the city. You know, those two things we didn't you know, we didn't plan for them, but thank God they're here. And so you know, so we often do engage with the community at large to make sure that the services that we are providing are extensive enough, or anything that we can't provide, that we are able to direct students to the places where they can find them. And of course, in Texas, you know, the sad challenge also has been that anyone who identifies as a state institution has had to shut down any of their diversity supports, and that includes anything that's based on ethnicity, on identity, any type of supports. So anyone who's a public institution as of December 31st had to shut them down. So I'm so proud of our students, because basically they took that as a sign, as we're the private institution in the city. And so we basically just said, we're your safe haven. So so basically our Pride organization is sharing space with anyone who wants to come over here. And thankfully the colleges in Houston aren't that far apart. So any student who needs support can come and get support from our institution, and our governor hasn't figured out a way to shut that down yet. So we're going to keep doing it until the cows come home. And so and then same thing, you know, we have a lot of people at Rice who go into healthcare. And so, you know, if we need to make recommendations of places that students that need to, you know, we know they'll find safe spaces. And we do have a really good, robust support center on campus, and that provides training for staff members, and you know, just getting used to conversations, and not getting you know, paralyzed by conversations. So So we'll keep fighting. The governor's probably trying to figure out some way that he can stop us. But so far, as a private institution with significant resources, he hasn't found that way yet.
Thank you for the fight. Kaya, what do you want to say?
Yeah, I think so you remember when I said I was a list girl before? I think really going in and like, again, with some sort of intentionality, and to some extent it is sad, right? Because you have to do work that other students who are not using these resources for the same things don't have to do, right? But that for me looked like, okay, looking into, so Mansour is Pomona's, like, that's what our therapy sessions and things like that are run through the building. So I was like looking up each therapist, and like I didn't end up using any of those therapists, but like I wanted to see what, you know, you specialize in. Do you say that you specialize in specifically helping, you know, LGBTQIA affirming issues, right? Then when it came to like specific healthcare, if I knew that I was going to use the school's healthcare, kind of going through now, this is like, and I've been in the weeds of like medical insurance before, so I had to tussle with them, but you know what I mean? So it can be a little dense, but like, what does that cover? What does that look like? You know, luckily we were in California, and it was so amazing hearing you say that, Tamara, but also heartbreaking that like, you know, that is a fight that happens in Texas. So luckily I didn't have to do that much, but like, you know, seeing in terms of like, if gender affirming care is something that is important to you, seeing like what could be covered in that extent. And I've actually been surprised the extent of like how much coverage and protection there can be for those things. Fingers crossed, luckily in California. Yeah, so I think just having that in that diligence and intention is hard, but I think that was my base.
Go for it, Sydney.
Yeah, I was gonna touch on the healthcare piece too. Everything you said was super spot on. Yeah, I would say have the conversation with your parents whether or not you're gonna be on like your college healthcare plan, or whether or not you're gonna be on their healthcare plan, and like if you're going to a different state, like what that means. Because like you said, sometimes you do have to get into the weeds, like with insurance companies, if you need access to gender affirming care. Like, are you trying to, you know, have surgery during college? Like, do you want some of your counseling sessions covered in college? Does your college have counselors there that can help you out with these kinds of things? Can they help you get to like healthcare centers if you need to talk to counselors, get letters for different things? So having that conversation with your family beforehand and figuring out, you know, what your insurance is going to be is definitely super important. And then, like you said, look up what the college university insurance plan is. What does this look like for students? And then another thing that I feel like was helpful for me was looking at like the sexual and reproductive justice organizations at Vassar, because those are very active. And I feel like that's been super intersectional with queer issues. And that just means that, you know, look at your universities, like Title IX policies, like what's going on that. Like you could even read online forums, like what are people's experiences, you know, when things like that come up. So definitely looking at what sort of sexual health options are offered to, like how is that being talked about on your college's like websites, and sort of what people's experiences are with healthcare. A lot of times college healthcare, like I feel like college healthcare has a bad reputation because college hospitals and clinics sometimes can be like an interesting mix of the kind of people who are working there. But I feel like I've had really positive experiences. There have been a lot of times where I've come in for like sexual testing and I was nervous about, you know, my Vassar says I'm male, like, you know, what's this person going to think? And the workers there have always treated me very well. So I think don't be scared of going to health services. And if you are, reach out to people at the university who can help, you know, advocate for you, stuff like that in advance. if that's not immediately obvious that it would go okay.
Absolutely.
Happy to talk what it looks like at the University of Vermont. Being in Vermont, I mean, I'll say it, we're in a better spot than folks are in Texas, right? We're not fighting our state legislation for equity or for access to healthcare. We have, I think, a lot of really great systems on campus. And so something we've been doing as a like Pride Center, a queer student resource center, PRISM, has been trying to demystify the process of accessing healthcare. So this past semester, we worked with a doctorate of nurse practitioner student on getting simplified resources that we are just have in a Teams folder. And whenever someone comes to us and says, hey, I'm thinking about gender affirming hormone therapy, we're like, great, here's all the info you need. And it walks students through the process and it says, okay, appointment 1, you're not getting hormones. That's fine. You're answering questions. You're talking with your provider about what your transition goals are. And then maybe by appointment 2 or 3, you're going home with a prescription. But it talks about like, here are all of the different ways that you can go through gender affirming hormone therapy. Here are what each of those hormones do to your body, to your mental health. We talk through the changes to your mental health as you're like going through like that hormone therapy. But then also the conversation around healthcare expands beyond transness, right? Like, Sid was talking a little bit about sexual health testing or going in and getting those questions answered and like not feeling like, is this a queer affirming space? And so we like personally vet some of the providers that we talk to and we say, okay, you're talking to like this person directly. So it's a warm handoff. It's like, I'm not sending you to student health services. I'm sending you to art. I'm sending you to someone that I know, who I've had conversations with, and I know is going to treat you with respect and dignity. And that is something that I would hope that people can expect when they go to university and go to student health services and say like, okay, I expect respect and dignity at like the very baseline of my humanity. And so some of that too, and like making it easier to access care is we have drop-in counseling hours with counseling, with counselors out of our counseling and psychiatric services, as well as all of the other identity centers on campus. So no matter what identity you hold, if you're at UVM, you have access to care in our spaces, not just in these offices scattered across campus. So that is something we're trying to do as well, is make access to care easier and demystify it and make it as simple as possible. Because college is hard enough on its own. You don't need to be navigating the struggles of healthcare on top of it. And so what we're trying to do is like use these opportunities to make it easier and to make it more accessible and to walk with you through that process as long as you'll have us. So I like hope that I can speak of this, like if that's not happening at your institutions, fight for it. Say like, this is what we want, you know, like stand up and be like, this is what other places have, and we deserve that too. We deserve that respect and dignity. Not maybe, you know, like get organized, but also girls get organized.
Thank you.
My colleagues covered that brilliantly. I have nothing to add.
Awesome. So one of the things that I realized that sort of my own lens heading into this is that when I was writing questions, I tend to think of it as like, okay, so you go to college and you already know that you're looking for a queer campus or a queer affirming campus. But part of queer experience is often doing some exploring. And that can be a very hard thing to do at a small K through 12 independent school in Brooklyn, for example. And so when you've been around the same people, you know, for a bit, it can be hard to change or explore in front of them. And so often that exploration does happen at college. And I'm wondering what a campus that fosters exploration, like how can a campus foster that kind of exploration? If a student, you know, is there, that's maybe not something that they know that they're looking for before they get there. Hit it.
I want to say to everybody who's watching, when you go to college, you'll just blossom no matter what. Like, especially if you go to the three sort of schools that you mentioned earlier, Sarah. So whatever your college experiences is, like you're gonna blossom and turn into a person that's really you, but you in so many new ways, no matter what. And so even if you're worried about picking a college that you think has a reputation of not being as queer friendly or not sort of obvious to be accepting of queer people, you're still going to find whatever that is, or whatever your community is, even if it's not queer people, people who support you, people who love you, and that like will be a journey. Just because going to a small school for a really long time, even if it's a really loving environment, can be hard and draining. So I think I don't have a ton to say because I think there are some environments that will fit students better than others and encourage that more than others, whether it's like through certain queer programming or queer visibility. But I think if people are worried about it, I wouldn't worry.
Thank you.
Yeah, and colleges are places of learning in the broadest respect. So you're learning in the classroom, and you're also learning outside of the classroom. So I know for our Queer Center, there's a huge education aspect of things, where whether you are an ally, whether you are a questioning person, whether you're someone who knows their identity, you can like go to a session and learn about all the whole spectrum of different things, different types of relationships, different types of identities, how those play out, healthcare. So there's going to be lots of ways for you to actually learn new things in sort of a formal setting. And then some schools will also have like queer studies program. If you really want to dive into the academics of things, you'll be able to do that as well. So it's going to be easy. Well, it should be easy for you to find places to learn if you're in an exploring part of your life.
Yeah, I would say definitely echoing that like college is a place and a time for exploration. Smaller schools, K through 12, allow you to do that in a certain way. And that doesn't end after, no one is expecting that that has ended for you by the time you go to college. That's ridiculous. I think that having a specific experience of like, I went to Pomona for my college, and then now I'm going to UCSD for my master's, which I'm graduating in 3 weeks. It's crazy. But thank you. But like even the difference into like going to a small liberal arts college and then going to a very large like university is like, that has been a different experience, right? And then like transitioning through that, and like literally transitioning through that, and transitioning through that in terms of like, what does like healthcare look like? What does it feel like to like have the like literal bodies? Like there's just more people in terms of like supporting you through these different journeys, I think is really helpful. But I also think it comes back to something Gage said earlier about the ease, right? Like it is so easy to like change my lived name and change, like those things that like I think speak to, I think when you really think about exploration, you think about like, how is the person to person gonna go? And sometimes that's so hard to predict that I would invite us to sort of take that off of our shoulders, right? It's not on you. But I think the ease of the community and how easy that is for that exploration to happen is really an important indicator.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I want to I can continue to pepper you guys with questions. I have more, but I want to give folks a chance for Q&A before we wrap up. If you have any questions, feel free to put them into the Q&A and we will get them answered. And in the meantime, I will keep you guys busy with a question, which is a pretty in the weeds question. And it's mainly for admissions folks, so you all may have some answers for it. Just about privacy issues for applicants. And I guess it's not even just for applicants, right? This is one of the things you guys have talked about is like healthcare and what does it mean to be on your parents' insurance or on the school's insurance. When the folks who are juniors now or seniors now, looking at the information that colleges ask for from them, are there things that students need to be mindful of if they're not out at school, if they're not out at home, when it comes to sharing information?
A thing that's on my mind about this, if you are a person who is not out at home, is, you know, the emails that we send you are coming just to you. They're a totally private thing. Hopefully your parents are not checking your emails or other people. Like that should be yours. But an area that can be challenging is if we send mail to your house. For example, you're admitted to Whitman and we're going to send a admit box to your house. And we use generally what is listed in the common application as preferred name or live name. And that has caused some problems for students. So you need to think a little bit about like, what is that situation going to look like? The common application recently added a section about a name that you would want like mail to come to. That's been confusing for some students. So it's a little hard to use that one. I think they're gonna continue to iron it out, like try and move in a good direction. But that's an area that you can, if you have sort of different ways you are presenting, use that section to protect your identity.
And that's been something interesting to kind of watch in the college arena, because there are some apps that I think are doing it better than others. You know, so that might be even a platform that if a school allows for multiple platforms, you may even want to look at the apps to see how they're asking that question and how they're presenting that question to you. Because as I'm reading applications, it's been one of those things that's caught my attention. You know, for example, I believe the QuestBridge application, and they have a lot more ways that you can actually like explain your situation and give context to things. And I think and yes, the last thing we would want to do is create any situation of danger for you at home if you know, we want to use your preferred name. So you but you know, you have to decide, you know, when you get once you get to campus and you're, you know, a full agency, then you know, you can do whatever. But I mean, if you still need the safety, it may just be best for you to make sure that on the app that there's no way that electronics could trigger something and all of a sudden we send it to the wrong, you know, with the wrong name on it. But be assured that, you know, once you feel safe enough, we can make those adjustments. And then when you're on campus for the admitted student program, you know, your parents don't necessarily have to see how you register yourself for the admitted student program. So, you know, you can come or you can fill out a new name tag when you get to campus. We're going to try to work with you in whatever zone that you are in terms of being out and about to your parents. And so, or to your family. And so we always want to be in a position of protecting where you are right now, but also celebrating where you are right now. So we put it all, kind of give us the pathway for how you want to be identified. And we'll and again, we're still, because we are in Texas, we're still working with, you know, the whole making sure that we can affirm you. But even if we can't legally do it, we will find as many ways to affirm you in terms of how we interact with you on campus.
Absolutely. Thank you. I just got a quick question. I was asking about what the application was you just mentioned, which is the QuestBridge application. That's a scholarship application. I'm going to try not to become hyper college counselory right now. So I will say it's a scholarship application. And do you have a choice about which application to fill out? Yes, and ask your college counselor is gonna be how I answer that question. Yes, you do, and also your school might have some particular thoughts on what you should do there. If there are no other questions, I'm gonna give it a minute. Oh, what do you suggest if we aren't sure what name we want? How easy or hard can it be to change it later?
Pretty easy in a couple different ways. One, if you are in the process of applying and something changes in that process, it's pretty easy for you to get in touch with us and we can make a change to your record. If that's not where you are, if you you feel like for reasons of safety or just comfort, you are going to apply kind of under one name, and then you come to college and you're like, yes, I'm ready to start living this other identity. Very easy. Just fill out this is one of the things you can tell if a college is like good and affirming. If it's easy for you to find the name change form and how easy is it to fill out. So yeah, and sometimes students will identities will grow and shift, and that may change more than one time over college, and that's okay too.
Absolutely. All right, oh, hey, Sydney, go ahead.
I had a question because when I applied to college back in the day on the Common App, I guess like 5 years ago, if that math is right, I remember being really frustrated that it just said male, female for a lot of colleges. And I was like, I guess I'll put male, but I really wanted to put transsexual male, transgender male, because that felt important to my like lived experience. And it was something that I talked about in my application. I was like, well, if I have to list my gender, I want this to feel sort of accurate to my life and, for people that are non-binary or identify otherwise. What's like the Common App doing these days?
I believe it's evolving. Like, that's where I would put it. It's like, I think there are ways that you can I was, in fact, and I was just clicking on, I still had my my reader up and I was trying to get in, and it's like, it's making me sign in again. It's like, doggone it. So but I do believe that question, and it is one of those questions that we, as members of the Common App, we constantly bring to their attention and said, okay, we need to keep evolving here, y'all. And so I do think that it is not as binary as it used to be, in terms of there are options to have certain identities. Is it fully evolved? I would say probably not, but it is evolving. And so I don't think it's as jarring now for kids to say that whether it is the male and female. I think there's and there's also questions about, what's your sex at birth versus what is your identity now. And so I think they at least have done that much to start carving a space for people to say, this is how I identify now. So
Yeah, so the drop-down list has expanded greatly, and I believe there's also a free text field. So you can cover that. There is a piece of this that's getting in a little bit to the weeds, in that the application to college and the application for financial aid are really different. And if you're applying for federal financial aid, there are guidelines around what we have to collect, having to do with some really archaic things, but we don't have as much control over how you can report gender with that. But none of that stuff is going to show up on any record that is strictly a financial aid thing. And we'll take kind of the identity nuance that you provide and apply it to the college piece of things.
And similarly to what you were saying about changing your name once you're on campus, I often find that an interesting tell on colleges on the Common App is, so as seniors know very, very well, and as juniors, you are about to find out. The Common App asks for the same information over and over again. And so when you fill it out for the Common App part of the Common App, it's the standard that Tamara's talking about. When you go to the college side, to a specific college, that specific college may ask about your gender in a different way. And that can be an interesting tell of, okay, what is this college asking about my gender? How are they asking about it? You know, and I think students sometimes can feel pressure in that moment to, okay, now I have to come out to this school. No, you don't. But they're trying to communicate something to you, which is about the openness of their community, which is a good thing. We have one last question, then I promise to let you all go. Thank you so much. What is your best advice for parents or families supporting their child in choosing which school to go to? Fingers crossed that they have options. They will. And advice on how to best help.
Well, some of this advice I would give, just kind of generally, like, the college search process is stressful. Whether you are wherever you identify on any spectrum. So couple rules of thumb. Parents, try to stay in the back seat as much. I'll drive the college search process. Be a supportive listener. Don't make every conversation that you have about the college search. I know some families have had a lot of success, like saying, you know, we're going to talk about colleges on Sunday at dinner time. So then the kid knows that that's where they can like deal with that stress, but not have it be a sneak attack about college because, you know, you want to be, your senior year is going to be busy. You're going to want to enjoy it as much as possible. So, kind of, even though this is going to be looming large in your life, try to.
Thank you.
I mean, I think what we've tried to do is that, you know, there's going to be, I mean, we know that parents are going to have questions, but we're making sure that we try to provide spaces for your questions, and then try to provide, you know, but then when your student is there, let them take, like, as Chris said, let them take the lead. But I mean, I think we're, you know, that's one of the aspects of the residential colleges. Sometimes it's, you know, one of their biggest thing is managing families and to basically, you know, letting the student hopefully have their free space, and it's like, call me if you found yourself freaking out about something, and you know, rather than putting that stress on your student who is trying, you know, but I think in general, just looking at the environment and just, I mean, and I think one of the things that I tell my staff when we're looking at applicants is that let the student take the lead on even setting the tone for what is important to them in the process. You know, don't assume because somebody's Black that being Black is going to be the top thing about what you're going to have to ask, that you say, oh, well, let me tell you all these things about that. And it's like, I didn't ask you that. I'm also a low income student. I'm also a queer student. I'm also there. So let the student. And I think that's the message I try to get across to everyone. It's like, let the students set the tone on what it is that they need in their college search and the things that they want to discuss about their college search. And don't make any assumptions about what they need. Really listen to them. And I think that's what you need to be looking for. What are the schools that really seem to be responding to you instead of telling you what they think you need to know?
Yeah.
I would also say, as much as you can support your kid doing overnight visits with different colleges, like if you can help them literally get there, and if you can find ways to connect them with current college students, especially like I know that I can be a little stubborn and like not want to go outside of my comfort zone, but once I actually like connected with those people and got there, I was really glad that I did. Um, so yeah, everything that everyone else said about, you know, really letting your kid take the lead and trust what they say is important to them, that it is. But I would also say, like, encourage them to really try stuff out and go stay with people, see what the experience is like, you know, help them figure out how to get there, all that kind of stuff.
Okay. So, recognizing that you all have given us a ton of time, and especially, say admissions folks at a difficult time of year to give people a ton of time, we're very, very grateful. This has been a really wonderful heart shot for me, and I don't think I could put it better than someone in the comments who says, thank you so much to all the panelists. You are all paving the way for a more affirming and inclusive future for all humans. And you bet. Thank you guys so, so, so much. I'll see you soon. Good night, everybody.